Hello and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced English learners. Indonesia will soon move its capital city to a new location. Why has Indonesia had to make this decision? And why did they choose this location? Is Indonesia the first country to change capitals? Let's answer these questions on today's episode of Thinking in English. Find the full transcript at thinkinginenglish.blog and head over to my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more excellent English content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written vocabulary list is available in the description of the podcast and on the blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Bucket list. Bucket list. A bucket list is a list of things that a person would like to do or achieve before they die. For example, visiting the Great Wall of China is on my bucket list. Unsuitable. Unsuitable. Not acceptable, suitable, or right. As in, the TV show was considered unsuitable for children. To submerge. To submerge. To go below or make something go below the surface of water. As in, the athlete submerges himself in an ice bath every day. Warped. Warped. Bent because of damage by heat or water. As in, have you noticed how warped the floor is? To pump. To pump. To force liquid or gas to move somewhere. For example, the new wine is pumped into storage tanks. Extraction. Extraction. This is the process of removing something. For instance, the extraction of resources has damaged the environment. Archipelago. Archipelago. A group of small islands or an area of sea in which there are many small islands. For example, Hawaii is an archipelago. Dependent. Dependent. Something that's dependent needs the support of something or someone in order to continue existing or operating. For instance, he has become dependent on alcohol. Administrative. Administrative. Relating to the work of managing or organizing a business or activity. For example, the administrative costs are increasing every year. Nusantara. You've probably never heard of this place before, but in the next few years, it will become the capital city of Indonesia. It will be the capital of the fourth largest country in the world by population and the largest economy in Southeast Asia. So, Nusantara is going to have an important and influential role in global affairs. Why did Indonesia decide to change its capital city? What does Nusantara mean? Have other countries changed their capital city before? Let's answer these questions on today's episode of Thinking in English. Currently, the capital city of Indonesia is Jakarta. I've never visited Indonesia before, although it's definitely on my bucket list. But some Indonesian friends of mine have told me a lot about Jakarta. Essentially, the city is gradually being destroyed. Being destroyed? How? The city is currently home to over 10 million people, but it was built on land unsuitable to host such a huge population. The land is swampy. The Java Sea is on Jakarta's doorstep, and there are 13 different rivers running through it. Swamps, seas, and rivers. If you think this sounds like a very wet city, you'd be right. Jakarta suffers from regular flooding, which causes significant disruption and damage to people's property. Recent years have seen the number of floods increase, and the scale of the floods has also been getting worse. But floods are not Jakarta's only issue. In fact, it is also one of the fastest sinking cities in the entire world. The city is literally sinking into the ground. North Jakarta has sunk by 2.5 meters in just 10 years, and scientists predict that up to 95% of North Jakarta will be completely submerged by 2050. Already, half of the entire city is below sea level. The result is more floods and significant damage to buildings and structures. As the city sinks, roads and pavements become warped, and buildings begin to suffer cracks and structural problems. For the residents of Jakarta, however, these issues are just one of numerous problems that have become part of their daily lives. Why is Jakarta sinking? That can't be normal for a city, right? But one of the major reasons is water. The city's water pipes don't provide enough safe and reliable water for 10 million residents. So, in parts of the city, people are forced to pump groundwater from deep below the surface and use this groundwater for drinking and bathing. However, as water is being removed, the city sinks down into the space left behind. Moreover, Indonesia doesn't properly regulate water extractions. In Indonesia, everyone, including normal residents and massive industries, are allowed to pump groundwater. But people are taking more water than they are allowed to, as the government is unable to provide enough water from other sources. Other cities have faced similar issues in the past. Japan's capital, Tokyo, for example, was also sinking 50 years ago. In that case, they used expensive technology to replace the groundwater being taken from below the city. They heavily regulated groundwater extraction and made industry use alternative water sources. Unlike Tokyo, Jakarta doesn't really have an alternative water source. It would take decades to clean local rivers and lakes so that the water is safe to be used by every single person. Furthermore, Jakarta also suffers from terrible air pollution, and the city has notorious traffic jams. In fact, the traffic is so bad that government officials require police escorts just to get to work on time. So, what do you do when your capital city is sinking, flooding, polluted, and overcrowded? Indonesia's answer is to build a new one. After considering almost 100 different locations, the government chose the area that will become Nusantara. Nusantara is being built in East Kalimantan, the Indonesian province on the island of Borneo, which will cost at least 32 billion to move. At the moment, only a few million people live in the entire region, which is famous for rainforests and orangutans. The city's name, Nusantara, means archipelago in Javanese. And I should probably take this opportunity right now to just apologize to everyone Indonesian for my pronunciation of your city's names. I've probably made some major mistakes, and I'm going to make more as we keep reading. Apparently, the new name was chosen as it was internationally known and represented the country's geography. However, critics have also said that it could be confusing because some Indonesian languages already use the word Nusantara to describe the entire country. Why are they building the capital on the island of Borneo? Well, there are several reasons. In that region, there are several existing cities, which means some infrastructure, like roads, has already been built. Also, the area doesn't suffer from the same natural disasters that affect most of the country. Indonesia is home to volcanoes, floods, tsunamis, and earthquakes, but Borneo is generally quite protected. The decision to move the capital is not without criticism. Some people are worried that there will be a lot of environmental destruction. As more people move to the new city, logging and deforestation will increase to make room and provide materials for the new people. Borneo is one of the world's most diverse and important environmental regions, and it's especially known for being home to orangutans, their only home. There are also the indigenous people of Kalimantan, called the Dayaks, who live lives dependent on the forest. Moving the capital to their land may destroy their environment. Without doing something to deal with the problems that face Jakarta, perhaps they will just be taking water shortages, air pollution, housing issues, and traffic congestion to a new island. Brazil created a new capital in the 1960s, Brasilia, which was supposed to be a fairer society without the inequality and poverty of the old capital Rio de Janeiro. Today, however, Brasilia is one of the most unequal cities around the globe. They just took the problems in Rio and moved them to Brasilia. Indonesia is not the first and will not be the last country to move their capital cities. In recent memory, countries including Brazil, Pakistan, and Nigeria have built and relocated new capitals. In fact, just a few weeks ago, at the end of 2021, the Egyptian government held their first meeting to organize the construction of a new administrative capital east of Cairo. Why do countries do this? The location of capital cities often has political significance, especially in newer countries. Washington, D.C. was chosen as the point between the USA's northern and southern states, while Australia's Canberra is in between the major cities of Sydney and Melbourne. The idea is to make these countries more unified. Nigeria also tried to unify the country by changing capitals in 1991, switching from the Christian dominated Lagos to Abuja in between the Christian south and the Islamic north. However, some Nigerians complain that it hasn't had the desired effect. Moreover, two of the most recent new capitals are Myanmar's Naypyidaw, apologize for the pronunciation, built in 2004, and Equatorial Guinea's Oyala, which became capital in 2017. Now, unlike the previous capitals I mentioned, these were not designed to help the people. Both of these projects were designed to move the governments, both dictatorships or coups, to safer locations away from the people. Basically, they were worried that being close to the people would be a risk to the government's safety. So here is today's final thought. On this episode of Thinking in English, we've looked at Indonesia's decision to move their capital city. Sinking, flooding, pollution, and overcrowding have forced the country to look for new locations. And they are not the first country to change capitals. And history has shown that it is not always successful. What do you think? Do you think Indonesia is making the right decision to move their capital city? What would you do? Would you build or fix Jakarta? Or would you move to a location different from Nusantara? Has your country ever changed capital? Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate every single person who takes the time to listen to my podcast. Make sure you head over to the blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, so you can read the whole transcript of today's episode and look at some of the other content I upload onto the blog. You can also check out my Instagram page. I post very regularly, and if you want to message me, I always reply to people on Instagram. Please leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating on Spotify. You can do that now, and I'm trying to get to 150 ratings by the end of February. Please recommend to all of your friends and maybe share on social media. And why not go back and listen to a few of the old episodes? It's one of the best ways to support the podcast. You can also donate on the Thinking in English blog by going to the support page. And yeah, have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to a Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Obesity is a major problem in countries all around the world. With billions of people living unhealthy lives, the consequences are very significant. Is obesity a disease? Or is it something else? Let's discuss it on today's episode of Thinking in English. Head over to the Thinking in English blog for a full transcript of today's episode. And why not check out my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more excellent content. Here is today's vocabulary list. Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to a Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Obesity is a major problem in countries all around the world. With billions of people living unhealthy lives, the consequences are very significant. Is obesity a disease? Or is it something else? Let's discuss it on today's episode of Thinking in English. Head over to the Thinking in English blog for a full transcript of today's episode. And why not check out my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more excellent content. Here is today's vocabulary list.